There's an 80% rule for going vegan that almost nobody talks about. Just eliminate one food and you get almost all of the environmental benefit. If you've ever wanted to go vegan to make the world a better place, but felt paralyzed by how hard it seems, this video is for you. But to understand the lazy way to becoming a vegan, we first have to explain why no one's telling you about it. Before we get to that one food, we need to talk about why you haven't heard this before. And to do that, I need to tell you what kind of guide this is. This is an imperfect guide, not a roadmap to purity, not an all-or-nothing ultimatum. An imperfect guide for imperfect people who still want to make a difference. One of the core tenets of veganism, maybe the most universally shared, is building a healthier planet. A food system that doesn't destroy the environment. That's something almost everyone can get behind, whether you're fully vegan, mostly plant-based, or just starting to think about this stuff. But here's the problem. After decades of go vegan or you're part of the problem, global meat consumption isn't falling, it's rising. The all-or-nothing message hasn't converted the masses, it's alienated them. And yet the movement keeps pushing the same framing. Because the alternative, that you could capture most of the benefit without going all the way, breaks the story. That's why you haven't heard about that one food decision. It doesn't fit. You've seen the headlines. Go vegan to save the planet. Your diet is killing the rainforest.
Listen to their screams! Animal abusers! Total losers! Dead bodies! Animals want to live! Animals feel pain! Dead bodies!
And you've probably felt that familiar cocktail. Guilt, overwhelm, paralysis. This guide is for people who felt that paralysis. People who care but felt like they couldn't measure up and so did nothing. It's also for people already deep in this work. People who've eliminated animal products entirely, who think carefully about sourcing and systems. If that's you, stay with me, because there's something here about how to make the environmental movement more inclusive. We'll get to that. But first, what does the science actually say?
2025 will be remembered as the year the climate crisis stopped knocking and kicked the door right down. Across continents, nature unleashed its fury. Record-breaking storms, catastrophic floods, raging wildfires and deadly heat waves pushed communities to the edge. From South Asia's devastating monsoon floods that swallowed towns and displaced millions, to powerful cyclones tearing through coastlines in India, Sri Lanka and the Caribbean, the human cost was staggering. Mountains collapsed under torrential rain, forests burned through historic heat, and cities struggled to cope with disasters arriving back to back.
The most comprehensive study ever conducted on food's environmental impact, Poor and Nemechek, Oxford, 2018, found something that should have changed the entire conversation. Not all animal products are equal, not even close. Beef produces roughly 60 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilogram of protein. Chicken, about 6. Legumes, less than 1. That's not a gentle slope, that's a cliff. And here's what that means. Eliminating beef and lamb alone captures 70 to 80% of the emissions reduction you'd get from going fully vegan.
Today, a shocking 26,000 species are currently threatened with extinction, and agriculture is a primary cause of that. Animal products use over 80% of the world's farmland, contribute 60% of food's greenhouse gas emissions, and 60% of our nitrogen and phosphorus pollution, as well as using a third of the world's water. Despite that, they provide just 37% of our protein and 18% of our calories.
Let that land for a moment. This isn't a fringe claim. It comes directly from our world in data's analysis of the Oxford Research, the same research vegans cite when arguing for plant-based diets. The data supports plant-based eating, but it also shows something inconvenient. The impact distribution is wildly uneven. Why? Because beef and lamb are ruminants. They digest food through fermentation, which produces methane, roughly 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. They require vastly more land, more water, and more feed per kilogram of protein than any other food source. But it's not just carbon. Across multiple dimensions, the same conclusions keep emerging. Beef and lamb are worst for land use. Cattle ranching is the single largest driver of deforestation globally. Worst for water consumption. Beef requires vastly more water per kilogram of protein than any other major food source. Worst for methane. The fermentation process in ruminant digestion is uniquely problematic. Among the worst for habitat destruction. The land clearing required for grazing and feed crops decimates biodiversity. The gap between beef and chicken is larger than the gap between chicken and most plant foods. That's the one decision promised at the start. 2 foods, most of the measurable environmental impact. Now, some of you are already thinking, but what about animal suffering? What about the ethics? We'll get there. That deserves a real answer, not a dismissal. But first, let's talk about what to actually do with this information.
So for the typical global consumer, avoiding meat and dairy is probably the single biggest way to reduce your impact on Earth. Global adoption of plant-based diets would reduce the amount of land needed to produce our food by 3.1 billion hectares. That's an area the size of the entire African continent. That land could store carbon. If you add that to the differences in emissions between animal products and plant-based products, that's a 23% reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions. Put differently, that's the emissions of the United States and European Union combined. Plant-based diets would cut our nitrogen and phosphorus pollution by 50%, cut our water use by 1/4. All of this comes together and you see a planet that would look completely different from space. It'd be more vegetated. Climate change would be a lot more under control, and our water resources would be far less depleted.
So we have this insight. Eliminating beef and lamb captures the vast majority of environmental benefit. The question is, what do you do with that? If you care about the planet but aren't sure where to start, or you felt overwhelmed by the all-or-nothing messaging and checked out entirely, this framework is for you. 3 levels of engagement. Not a purity test, not a ranking of who's a better person, just a way to think about where you are and where you might go. Level 1, the starting point. This is where most of the environmental leverage lives, and it's the most accessible entry point. Remember what the data showed. Beef and lamb are in a category of their own. Worst for emissions, worst for land use, worst for water, worst for deforestation. The gap between these 2 foods and everything else is enormous, larger than the gap between chicken and most plant foods. So the starting point is simple. Stop eating beef and lamb. That's it. You can keep everything else, chicken, fish, eggs, dairy, whatever works for your life, just those 2. If this is where you start and where you stay, that's worth celebrating. You've made the single highest impact dietary change available. You're contributing to a healthier planet. You're in. Level 2, going further. For a lot of people, level 1 is just the beginning. Once you've made that first change, you might find yourself wanting to go deeper, to have an even greater positive impact. This is where you start looking at the next tier of choices. Reducing dairy, especially cheese, which has a surprisingly high footprint. Eating less meat overall, making it the side dish rather than the center of the plate. Shifting toward plant-based proteins more often. Each step compounds, and there's something that happens when you start paying attention. You notice more, you get curious, you find it easier than you expected. If you're operating at level 2, even imperfectly, even inconsistently, you're making a meaningful difference. This is where most environmentally conscious people land, and it's genuinely good. Level 3, deep engagement. This is where the most committed people go. If this level calls to you, it's a genuinely important place to be. At level 3, you're thinking about the full picture. The sourcing of your food, the systems behind it, palm oil and rainforest destruction, water-intensive crops, food waste, regenerative agriculture. the welfare of animals beyond just the question of whether to eat them. This is where you work to make things coherent, for yourself, for the planet, where you hold the complexity rather than looking for simple answers. The people at level 3 push the entire conversation forward. They do the hard thinking that eventually shifts what's possible for everyone else. But here's what's crucial. If you're at level 3, you have a responsibility to the people at levels 1 and 2. Not to judge them, not to remind them how much further they have to go, but to welcome them, to encourage them, to recognize that someone who just gave up beef is stepping onto the same path you're on, and that the movement grows by bringing people in, not by keeping them out.
Today, we're having a nationwide animal rights march. In South India, we're organizing it as part of Bengaluru Brigade for Animal Liberation. The idea is to march for animal rights, to spread awareness about the concept of veganism, and to help people see that veganism is not extreme, that it's not aggressive, but it's a social justice movement meant to highlight that animals are sentient beings. And
protesting for animal rights, just showing people that animals should be liberated, they shouldn't be used or exploited, their bodies are not ours, their lives are not ours, we shouldn't use them for food, we shouldn't use them for entertainment, we shouldn't use them for clothing, and I'm just amazed by how many people agree with that sentiment. Veganism is no longer seen as a cult thing, it's in the mainstream, it's overwhelming, really.
Now let's address what some of you have been thinking since the beginning. The vegan movement isn't primarily about carbon emissions. It's about reducing animal suffering. And this framework, these 3 levels, allows animal suffering to continue. People at level 1 are still eating chicken, eggs, fish, dairy. Animals are still dying. That's true, and it deserves an honest response, not a deflection. Here's where we're coming from. This guide takes a pragmatic view. It asks, given that the all-or-nothing message has failed to reduce global meat consumption, given that it's actually rising, what approach might actually work? The answer we're proposing is influenced by 2 things. First, a broadly utilitarian perspective. If the goal is reducing total harm to animals and the environment, then 1 billion people eliminating beef creates more impact than 10,000 people going fully vegan. The math favors the approach that actually spreads. Second, an analysis of how social movements succeed. Movements grow when they welcome people in. They stall when they demand purity at the gates. Every person shamed for only giving up beef is a potential ally lost. But here's what we want to be clear about. This is not the only valid way to think about this. If your ethical framework says that any animal death is unacceptable, full stop, that's a coherent position. If your compassion is activated by the suffering of chickens specifically, or fish, or any creature not covered by just give up beef, that's legitimate. We're not here to tell you your ethics are wrong. What we're saying is the us versus them framing isn't working. Level 3 people treating level 1 people as not good enough isn't growing the movement. It's shrinking it. This is a pragmatic argument for a more inclusive approach. It's one way forward. If it resonates, use it. If it doesn't, find the path that does. What we share, all of us in this conversation, is a desire to reduce suffering and protect the planet. That common ground is bigger than our disagreements about method. Here's something that doesn't get said enough. You are allowed to be imperfect. You are allowed to care about the planet and still eat cheese. You are allowed to reduce your beef consumption by 80% and call that a win, because it is a win. The framing of dietary ethics as binary, pure, or complicit isn't just emotionally damaging, it's strategically disastrous. It turns potential allies into defensive enemies. It prioritizes identity over outcomes. It values the performance of virtue over actual reduction of harm. The planet doesn't care about your label. It doesn't care whether you call yourself vegan, flexitarian, climatarian, or nothing at all. It cares what you actually eat. You know what's more useful than a dietary label? a direction. Moving toward lower impact eating. That's it. No purity test, no membership card. Just a direction. Every person who wanted to help but felt like they couldn't measure up. Every would-be ally who got shamed for asking questions. Every reasonable person who decided environmentalists were insufferable moralists and tuned out entirely. That's the cost of demanding perfection. Meanwhile, a world where 1 billion people simply stopped eating beef, imperfect people, people who still eat chicken, people who wouldn't dream of calling themselves vegan, that world has a fighting chance. Perfection was never the goal. Progress is. So here's your move. If you're just starting, begin with beef and lamb. That's where the leverage is. If this is all you ever do, it's enough. You're in. If you want to go further, go further. Each step counts. If level 3 calls to you, answer it. Do the deep work and bring others along by welcoming them wherever they start. The thing is, no one is responsible for fixing the entire food system alone. We are responsible for making reasonable choices with the information we have. The planet doesn't need a handful of perfect people. It needs a lot of imperfect people, moving in the right direction, together. Start where you are, do what you can, welcome others doing the same.